Lake with Crescent Front Lutheran Church in Rancho Cucamonga. I hope you're having a wonderful day and a wonderful week. It is almost the 4th of July on Saturday, and so I'm thinking this week a lot about freedom and what that means, and people that fought and died and gave their lives for us to be free. You know, freedom comes in so many ways and shapes and forms, and I think that sometimes as Americans we take that for granted if we've grown up in this country and freedom is all around us, and so sometimes we don't realize what life might be not to be free. Like if we were, raised in another system and we did not have freedoms like we do. Scripture talks a lot about freedom as well, and I've talked about that on some of these videos, that we are free not just from things, like how Scripture talks about how we're free from sin. Thanks be to God for that, and we're free from the power of death, but we're also free for things. We're free in order to do things. We're free in order to love. We're free in order to serve our neighbors. And one of the ways that we are free, and I think it's super important to remember this during this time, it is for me anyway, and I'm often sharing just sort of like my own spiritual journey and things that I've learned along the way, because it might benefit some of you out there. We have freedom to determine our own attitude. We are free to choose whether or not we want to be more joyful and hopeful and celebrate, or if we want to be more negative and cynical and depressed. And sometimes that's easy to do, to choose a positive attitude. If things seem to be going on around us, whether it's in our families or our workplace or our businesses or our nation or our world, if things are obvious, we see obvious celebrations. One thing I think of, for instance, is like when the Olympics happens, around the world, that's an obvious time of celebration. And then it's easy to have a positive attitude. But I'm inspired by the Apostle Paul, who talked about how, for him, he learned how to be okay, to be peaceful, whether he was in prison or whether he was out, traveling the land. And because he realized that what made him okay was the presence of Christ wherever he was. I find that very encouraging. Now, for me and for, I think, a lot of people in the helping professions, and maybe for people who are in other professions as well, sometimes it's difficult during this particular time historically, because we're aware of a lot of people obviously in pain. We're aware of people that are afraid of the coronavirus. We're aware of people that are sick from the coronavirus. We're aware of people who are suffering and maybe even dying alone from this virus, and so many who are working in hospitals and other medical care facilities that are really struggling. We're aware of people struggling under racial tension, and we're aware of the police that are struggling, and there's a lot of pain going on right now. I'm sure you're aware. I mean, you just turn on the news or look at social media and it's everywhere. We're aware of Democrats fighting Republicans, Republicans fighting Democrats, and on and on. And so, it's easy to let that just totally get to us. I was sick for a couple of weeks, and I think that I was sick because I really was sick. I had allergies that, was going on. But also, I think that a lot of that was emotional. I was just really wiped out from not the workload. That's not what generally tires people out, actually, is not workload as much as just the emotional interpretation of all that we're doing. And it hurts me sometimes to see that people are hurting. But I'm aware that I could just keep going down that road indefinitely and being frustrated and cynical and negative, or I can have more control over my own attitude because I'm free. So I'm free to be miserable, really, as we all are. We are free to be miserable, or we are free to be joyful at any given moment. So for me, that takes doing some things intentionally, taking control of my attitude. Now, I'm blessed that I had two incredible parents that taught me a lot about this. My father was an economist. He had his PhD in economics, and he was an economics professor and stockbroker. And he, every day, listened to positive mental attitude tapes and read books and had little sayings all over his mirror. And he always talked about how we are in control of the things we speak to one another and the things we speak to ourselves. He used to tell me all the time, you got to put positive in, because a lot of negative stuff comes in naturally if we listen to the news or social media or even our friends or things like that. So we have to be intentionally putting positive things into our brains. My mom also, she was a clinical psychologist, and she dealt a lot with people's emotions and what was going on with their lives and any kind of trauma or stress or despair. And she, dealt with some pretty heavy things going on with people. But she also talked about how we can lead our own hearts and lead our own selves and center ourselves spiritually and be the people we choose to be. So both of my parents had this philosophy of work harder on yourself than you even do on your job. Now, that's not to say don't work hard on your job, certainly, and I advocate giving above and beyond what anybody would expect of you or me in our workplaces. Strive for excellence in all that we do, of course. But I agree with what they're saying. Work even harder on yourself than you do on your job. Meaning, look at where you want to be a year from now. Where do you want to be 5 years from now? Don't just hope for a good life, but design a life of excellence. Excellence for you. What would that mean for you or for me? Look at our own deepest values. What are the kinds of people we want to be, and design and plan that life? When we do that, we naturally shift from more of a despairing attitude, because the despair comes from things we cannot control. Like, we can't control the virus. We cannot control racism. All over the world, we can look at ourselves, of course, but we can't control everybody else's reactions and thoughts and feelings. We cannot control our neighbors' attitudes, whether they're negative or positive. We cannot control how kind people are to us. We cannot control if people love or respect us. There's so much out of our control. We can't control political fighting. But what we can control is, how do we want to design our own life? Even if we're out of a job right now, even if it's an economic downturn, some of those things are out of our control. But what we can control is, where do I see myself a year from now? Best case scenario, what kind of business do I want to start? What kind of classes do I want to sign up for? Online classes even. Do I want to write a book? Do I want to find an agent or a publisher? Do I want to apply for this or that kind of opportunity or school, or learn a new trade, or learn a new language? Do I want to reach out to people? There's so much, yes, during quarantine, so much we can do. I get it. We can't go to restaurants or movie theaters. That's part of life, and it's just the case that we can't do that right now. But there's so much we can do. What kind of person do I want to be? How can I work on myself and my own character? How can I make the world a better place? How can I make my own life better? There are millions of opportunities to do that right now. And by doing that, by writing out a map of a designed life, how do I see myself a month from now? Where do I want to be a month from now? How do I want to plan my weeks and my days so I can get there? Where do I want to see myself a year from now, 5 years from now, etc.? Then that naturally changes our attitude, because we're excited. We have reasons to get out of bed in the morning. We're not just focused on this virus or racism. We're focused on what I can do with my life, with the gifts that God has given me, with the joy that God has given me, the things I find wonderful, with the difference I can make, however I can make it in people's lives. That brings us naturally to a place of excitement, and that naturally changes our attitudes. So, hope this makes sense. Please subscribe to this channel if you have not yet. Comment below if you have questions, and also comment on, what do you do? What are you doing right now during quarantine that can positively make a difference in your life? How do you want to design your life, and how can you start doing it right now? Have a wonderful day. Bye-bye.